Hi, welcome to the Gemara on Chaf Hei Amud Aleph. We're starting immediately following the Mishnah. Bishama modim modim. It makes sense about modim modim. In other words, it makes sense that the person who says the word modim twice is silenced. Demekse k'shtei reshuyot, because it looks like the person is speaking to two different deities, two different gods. And Rashi explains here shtei reshuyot. Umekabel modeh elha achar eloha. It looks like you're thanking one God and then you're thanking another God, and that's why you say modim, God A, and modim, God B. Al tov yizacher shemecha. The idea that your name should be remembered for good, or you should be thanked for good. Nami. That one also is sort of obvious why that's bad. Zemashma al tov in ve'al ra lo. Because it sounds like you only thank God for that which is good and not for that which is bad. V'tznan, and we learned in the Mishnah, chayav adam mevarech al hara'ah kashem shehu mevarech al hatova. A person is obligated to give thanks for the bad, just as a person gives thanks for the good. And Rashi explains, if you didn't know, that al hara'ah we're referring to the bracha of Baruch Dayan Ha'emet, which we say when we unfortunately hear tragic news, like somebody's death. And al hatova, we say Baruch HaTov V'Hamitiv. That's the bracha that's made over good news. So we actually have to bless on both, so it makes sense to silence someone who makes it sound like we only bless God for the good. Ella, al kan sipur yagiu rachamecha, my taima. However, when it comes to the person who says, your mercy reaches a bird's nest, what's the reason? Meaning, why would we? Why don't we like it that a person says that? Why do we silence that person? Pligi ba tre Amorai. Two Amoraim disagree about this. B'ma'arava, in the west, meaning in Israel. Rabbi Yossi bar Avin, Rabbi Yossi bar Zveda. So these two rabbis disagree. Chad Amar, one says, Mipnei shematil kin'a b'ma'aseh breshit, because you inject jealousy or instill jealousy into God's creations. And Rashi explains, Matil kin'a Lomar al ha'oforchas ve'al ha'behemot v'chayot einochas. It sounds like you're saying, well, God's really merciful on the birds, but good luck to the other animals. So that's just sort of not nice. V'chad amar, and the other one says, mipnei she'oseh midotav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu rachamim ve'inan el gzeirot, because it makes it sound like God's mitzvot are merciful, or for the purpose of mercy, and in fact, in truth, they are their decrees. In other words, we're not supposed to attribute reasons to God's mitzvot. Rashi explains, Inan el gzeirat melech, Rashi is a different girsa, la'atil aleinu olo, to put his yoke upon us, God's yoke upon us, lahodia she'anachnu avodav v'shomrei mitzvotav, to tell us that we are God's servants and the doers or the keepers of God's mitzvot. We're not supposed to say, I keep this mitzvah because it's so great and merciful. We're supposed to accept it as a gzeirah. And that's what we don't like about this idea. It's an incorrect theological assumption to praise God specifically for the ways in which God is merciful. Or for a mitzvah that we perceive to be merciful, to praise it as being merciful is theologically problematic. Hahu denachid kamei de Rabba. There was one who went down before Rabba, meaning went down to lead davening. Amar, and here's what he said in the leading of davening. Atah chasta al kan sipor, atah chutz v'racham aleinu. You had mercy on a bird's nest, so you should also have mercy and compassion on us. I'll skip the parentheses. Amar Rabba said, Kama yada haimer rabbanan l'ratzuye l'mare. How much this rabbi knows about how to win favor with God, meaning, good job, you really know how to attract God's attention. Amar le Abaye said to Rabba, v'hamishavkinu totznan. But wait, didn't we learn in the Mishnah that we're supposed to shush him? Didn't we learn this isn't a good thing? V'Rabba lachtude la Abaye hu deba. Rabba was just obviously knew this idea and was just doing this to sharpen Abaye, meaning to test him. So he praised the guy leading davening just to make sure that Abaye would say, wait a minute, you're wrong. It was just an educational device. It's not that he actually liked what the guy did. Here's another story. Someone went down to pray in front of Rabbi Chanina. Amar, Hakel Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora. standard words from davening. Ha'adir v'hachazak v'ha'amitz. So he added some other words of praise, all sort of relating to God's strength. He added these additional words. Amarle, siamtinu l'shavche demarcha. Have you finished praying? Have you finished praising your master? Sarcastic question, meaning like, is that all? Like, the point at which you're going to add, why only add those few words, right? Is that really all you have to say about God? Hashtahani tzlata, ilav tekadvinhu Moshe be'oraita va'atu knesset hagdola v'tekninhu, anan lo amrinan lehu. Now, or realize now that these three, Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, Vanara, these words, so Hagadol, Hagibor, Vanara, these three words, if it were not for the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu had written them in the Torah, and that the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah had come and established them, Teknin, who established them, Anan lo amrinan lehu, we wouldn't even say them. The Atamart Kulehai, and you said all of this. In other words, we only have permission to say any praise of God at all. We only have permission to say these words anyway, because Moshe wrote them and the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah established them. So how could you come and add all this stuff? And Rashi explains, Kadvinhu Moshe b'Torah, he gives you the pasuk, Hakel Hagadol Hagibor Vanara Asher Lo Yisa Panim, that's the pasuk in Dvarim, and Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, it's a reference to Sefer Ezra, Va'atal Elokeinu Hakel Hagadol Hagibor Vanara Shomer HaBrit V'Chesed. So we have that as a matbea, we have that as guidelines from Tanakh, but if it weren't for that, we wouldn't be allowed to say these words in praise of God, because once you start, how can you possibly stop? How can you possibly say that you've said enough? Mashala Adam Shahayu Elaf Alfe Alafim Dinarei Zahav. It's like a person who had a lot of money, okay? Thousands upon thousands of gold coins. Vahayu Mekalsinoto Be'elaf Dinarei Kasef. And when they praised him, the way that they would praise him is by saying that he had some silver coins, right? Thousands of silver coins. Lognai hulo, isn't this actually degrading to him? Right? There's such a thing as praise, which is not actually praise. If you're saying, well, this guy who has thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, yeah, he's got some money, right? That's not a nice way to speak, and that's the mashal to praising God with just a few words. It's like damning with faint praise. Amar Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina said, Hakol b'dei shamayim chutz mirat shamayim. Everything is in the hands of heaven except for fear of heaven. That's the only thing that isn't controlled by God directly. Shine Emar, as it says in the pasuk, V'atah Yisrael ma Hashem Elokecha shoel mimcha ki im liyira. The only thing that God asks of you is to fear God. And Rashi explains, Chutz miyirat shamayim, Ota misura b'yedei adam. That is given over to people. Shehu atzmo mechin libo lekach. That you yourself, or a person oneself, has to prepare one's heart to fear God. Even though God could make our hearts do this, God has the power to make us all fear God. Like it says, we're like materials in the hands of the artist. God could do whatever. Right, so too are you in my hands, Israel. That's what God says about the Jews. The Omer and another one about God removing the heart of stone. God has the power to control our hearts, but God leaves that to us. It's a statement really about free will, and that we have the free will to decide how we're going to approach God. So that is in our own hands. Michal Dira Milta Zutratihi. Does this pasuk imply that fearing God is a small thing, right? It says Zutrati is small or little, minor, right? It says the only thing that God asks from you, just one small thing, lira, right? To fear God. Is that a small thing? Yeah. L'gabe Moshe Rabbeinu milta Zutratihi. When it comes to Moshe, it's a small thing, right? So the pasuk, this pasuk, which is said in the context of Moshe saying it, right? Moshe's telling us this is what God asked. So sure, for Moshe, it was a small thing. So he's the one who says it. So for him, it didn't seem like a big deal. Mashala adam shemivakshin himenu kli gadol v'yeshlo. It's like someone who you request from him, you borrow from him you want to borrow from him a big vessel, something very large, v'yeshlo, and he has it. Domeh alav kikli katan. Then it seems to him like a small thing, like a small matter, right? Since he has it in his house, the fact that you're looking for it, it's like, oh yeah, sure, I've got this, no big deal. Katan ve'ein lo domeh alav kekli gadol. But if you ask someone for even a small vessel, a small thing that they don't have, right? Katan ve'ein lo, a small thing that they don't have, domeh alav kekli gadol, it seems like a big thing. Right? When you've got it all down, it doesn't seem like a big deal, and that's the analogy is to Moshe and fear of God. For Moshe, it wasn't a big deal at all. Amar Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera said, Ha'omer Shma Shma, someone who says Shma twice in the course of saying Shma, Ka'omer Modim Modim Dami. It's like one who says Modim Modim, right? Says that word twice, which you've already learned is a bad thing. Meitzveh, we have a contradiction to this. Hakoret Shma v'kofla, hareze meguneh. Someone who doubles Shma, again, says the word Shma twice. This is disgraceful, negative. It's a bad thing. Sorry, that's a braita. Migunehu dehave shtuke lo mishadkin lei. The braita just says that it's bad, it's disgraceful, but it doesn't say that we silence him. So this is a contradiction, right? Do we silence him, or do we just say, well, that's bad, but we'll move on? Lo kasha. It's not a contradiction. Had amar milta milta v'taniwa. Had amar psuka psuka v'taniwa. So the difference is that in one case, you are saying, the Braita is talking about a case where you say each word of the Shema and repeat it. So you say Shema, Shema, Yisrael, Yisrael, and that's you don't get shut up, but it's disgraceful. And the other one is someone who says one pasuk and then says the pasuk again. That person deserves to be silenced entirely. And Rashi says milta milta v'taniwa. Kol teva omer v'shoneh ein kan mashma'ut shtei rishiyot. If you just repeat the word, it doesn't sound like there are two. Doesn't make it sound like there are two gods that you're praying to. It just sounds like ridiculous. Like, why are you repeating word for word? But it doesn't sound like there are two gods. Whereas apparently repeating the entire pasuk does make it sound like there are two gods. Amrle Rav Papa Rava. Rav Papa said in response to this idea to Rava, "V'dilma meikar lo kiven date." Maybe the first time he said it, he just didn't have kavana, and so he repeats it again with kavana. Like, why are we judging him so harshly? Amar lei, he says back to him, Chavruta klape shmaya. Do we have, basically, can you have a chavruta with God? Is the relationship with God one where you can act like a friend, like an acquaintance, like where you stumble over your words the first time, so you repeat it? Ila mechavendate machinole be'arzafta. If he didn't have kavanah, then we hit him with a blacksmith's hammer. Marzafta is a hammer and nafcha is a blacksmith. We hit him with a blacksmith's hammer until he has kavanah. So basically, like, he should do better. He should learn to have kavanah. We're not going to let you just be so casual in repeating things to God. This is basically what Rashi says, do you treat God just like a friend? To speak to the person like without intention, and then you repeat it, and you show, by repeating it, you show that you weren't really paying that much attention to begin with. Like, oh, sorry, God, wasn't really paying attention that time around, let me do that again. So they come down hard on this idea. Moving on to the next part of the Mishnah. One who uses euphemisms for the arayot, we silence him, meaning one who sort of reads those verses about forbidden sexual relationships almost like allegorically and says they're not meant to be taken literally. Tana Rav Yosef, so Rav Yosef taught, Kalon aviv v'kalon imo. An example of this would be the disgrace of one's father or the disgrace of one's mother, meaning you're saying it just means like insulting them publicly. It doesn't mean actually having sex with them. It means something else bad, but it's not a literal reference to sex. If you speak about it that way, that is bad. Ha'omer mizaracha lo titen lahavir. At the end of the Mishnah, someone who says that the prohibition against offering your children to Molech is really about something else and not actually literally about that prohibition. Tana de Rabbi Yishmael. It was taught in the house of Rabbi Yishmael, B'Yisrael haba al hakutit, v'holid mimenu ben la'avodah zarah hakatuv medaber. The explanation of our Mishnah is that it's talking about someone who, it's someone who says that the verse is talking about a Jewish person who has sex with a kutit. a specific non-Jewish type of woman, and they have a child for idolatry. So that's the case that's referring to someone who says that the pasuk about Molech is referring to that case. That's the person who's condemned in our Mishnah. Okay, we'll stop there.